can talk. They had known each other for a number of years when T.R. was Secretary of Labor, and he was also a governor of New York. Booker T. Washington knew the South. He knew the politics of the South. He knew whites and blacks of the South. T.R. understood that the strength of the Republican Party was in the South and the new black voters, Republican, because the South was solid Democrats. Okay, so that was one. Therefore, any appointment that any black person got from a federal appointment was filtered through Booker T. Washington to the president. Many of the white Southern appointments was filtered through Booker T. Washington. Why? Because Booker T. Washington knew who the gold Democrats were. He knew who were the white Democrats who would be willing to work with a Republican administration. So politics, power. Two, this was before the Harlem Renaissance, printing and literature in New York in the 1920s. During this particular time, Tuskegee was a printing machine. So therefore, if you wanted information printed and disseminated, it would go through Booker T. Washington. Two, when people like the Schiffmans and the Rosenwalds began to give money for black education as well as white education, it came through Booker T. Washington. When the General Education Board, the Southern Education Board, prior to a public school system, filtered through Booker T. Washington, he was on the board of directors. His wife, his third wife, Anna Murray, was the head of the National Association of Negro Women. So Mrs. Washington had that. Each summer they would have a training ground for black farmers. As I said, 90% of the blacks lived in the South. Most of them were agriculture. So they were training them. They was also training ministers. All of the black press, most of them were in Booker T. Washington's pocket because of the amount of money he could give for advertising. And they were his mouthpiece all over the world. When Andrew Carnegie made the gift of $600,000 to Tuskegee Institute, it was better endowed than the University of Alabama. As a matter of fact, Washington had an office in New York City. He and his chairman of his board of directors, William Baldwin, went to Andrew Carnegie's office, and Andrew Carnegie wrote the $600,000 for Tuskegee. He then put a blank check there and told Booker T. Washington to fill it in. And he said, this is to be used specifically for Booker T. Washington and his family for whatever they wanted to do. Washington said, no, can't do that because people think I work for Booker T. Washington and not Tuskegee. But they eventually made it so that he could work not with a salary from Tuskegee, but on the interest that was made. So politics, finance, PR, literature, education. Booker T. we think that Booker T. Washington didn't agree with liberal arts education with Du Bois. That wasn't true. They had differences, but it was a matter of power. Booker T. Washington said, what you mean? He said, I hire more college graduates than anybody in the country. I hire them from black schools like Fisk and Tuskegee and Howard University. Booker T. Washington was on the board of trustees at Howard University. Booker T. Washington was on the board of trustees of Fisk University, where his wife graduated from. He hired him also from Harvard University and MIT. The head of his industrial training program had graduated from MIT. The head of his education training program had graduated from Harvard. Education, politics, money, never again, I would argue, will you have that much power concentrated in the one man or one woman's hand. That's why I say you'll never have a black person with that much power in terms of the Negro race. As a matter of fact, many historians have called the period from 1900 to 1915 as the age of Booker T. Washington in terms of American household. And then finally, Booker T. Washington had an idea of his own importance. So he kept his record. The Booker T. Washington papers now are available, and it's 14 or 15 volumes that you can go and that you can have there. The man was brilliant. And when my friend Everett Pace, speaking of Chautauqua, what does Chautauqua mean, asked me to do, after I'd done W.E.B. Du Bois for 3 years, asked me if I would do Booker T. I said, I don't know, Ev. I said, I'm going to do Du Bois, and I don't know if I can deal with this Booker T. Washington thing. So I eventually did it, and what I realized, I had a mindset against Booker T, and I was prejudiced. And I was prejudiced for the same reason that most people are prejudiced, out of ignorance. I didn't know who he was. But once I studied him and understood him, this brother was awesome.